please dive with me into the depths of horror. True paranormal story number 1, Bloody Mary. When I was 12 years old, I became very interested in the paranormal. So my friend told me about standing in front of a mirror and reciting the words Bloody Mary several times in a row. Supposedly, this Bloody Mary would show up in person if you do that. I wanted to try it, but I was too afraid to do it alone. So one day, this friend and I stayed after school. After everyone had left, we walked down through the empty hall in the girls' bathroom in front of the mirror and began saying Bloody Mary 5 times in a row. We then heard a very strange female voice calling our names. We were terrified and we ran out into the hallway, but nobody was around. 2 days later, I was sleeping in my upstairs bedroom and I was awoken around 2 in the morning by the sound of crying. My parents were downstairs in their bedroom asleep and there were no TVs or radios on at the time. I was terribly frightened because it sounded like a young woman crying right there next to me in my room. Then, I will never forget what happened next. I looked up and I saw a lady standing next to my bed weeping. She was very pale and had tears coming down her face. Her head was surrounded by massive unruly black hair. She wore a torn white dress. Continuing to cry, she just stared at me. I finally said, "Leave me alone." Then she disappeared, but I could not sleep again that night. The next night, I dreamt that the spirit of another woman was choking me, and the crying lady from the previous night was standing right next to her watching. I then woke up and I couldn't breathe. It felt like somebody was in the room with me. I ran out of my room in the pitch black hallway and screamed. My parents came rushing upstairs. I feel that by chanting Bloody Mary, I somehow drew these spirits to me, and it was a very, very scary experience. Although I didn't like what happened to me, I still do want to explore the paranormal. However, I'm afraid of what might happen, and my parents think I'll go to hell if I continue. The Ouija board. This story was actually from my mother when she was younger. She said one time when she was a teenager, she was curious and thinking it would be a fun experience playing with the Ouija board. Her and a group of her friends got together and started asking some questions to the Ouija board. Everything was going great until the planchette started moving on its own without anyone touching it. Slowly, it spelled out, "I will follow you forever." Everyone started screaming and panicking, and without knowing how to close the session out, they just put the board away, and that was a big mistake. As my mother was watching TV with my grandma, she heard a noise from the kitchen and she decided to check it out. As she walked into the kitchen, a dark shadow-like entity with large, angry eyes then launched at her, causing her to scream in terror. My grandmother, who was right behind her, only saw my mom fall backwards and never saw the entity. She tried to calm her down, suggesting that she might have imagined it, and things went back to normal for a while. Later, my mom went on a trip to Laredo to buy some merchandise to sell during a bus stop. My mother went to the bathroom and suddenly everything around her darkened and she heard the bathroom door lock from the outside. Terrified, she started screaming and asked for help, but people who were outside couldn't open the door. She felt dozens and dozens of roaches crawling all over her feet. She began to scream louder than ever. But minutes later, the lights turned on, and someone opened the door, and everything went back to normal. Just like if it was a nightmare. These strange incidences began happening more frequently, and the angry-looking entity kept bothering her, apparently unexpectedly. Eventually, my mother started dating a man who would eventually become my father. He knew a lot about these entities and also about being a Freemason. He helped my mother do a lot of these experiences and helped her overcome most of them, but sadly, he passed away in 2020. After he passed away, the paranormal experiences returned to my mom's life, knowing that her protector was now gone. Today, the entity still bothers her and appears in her nightmares and sometimes manifests materially. I, myself, will follow in my father's footsteps and will try to gain as much knowledge as I can to confront this dark entity and keep it away from my mother and from our lives forever. The Mothman. In the 1960s, in West Virginia, Point Pleasant, many paranormal and unexpected sightings occurred. All of these sightings and experiences have been documented by the authorities and the newspapers. In November of 1966, two couples went on a date to a World War II dump site in Point Pleasant. They claimed as they were there, a large winged black creature with red glowing eyes chased them out of there. They reported the incident to the police. This marked the beginning of the paranormal events ever documented. The black creature would chase people to the ground. Many times, other people would suffer from bleeding eyes. Some people saw a giant mutated owl flying in the sky. People were beginning to see this Mothman in the sky, flying over their houses, and even in their backyard. A resident claims that there was a Mothman standing by a tree about 7 foot tall, staring right at her as she was in her kitchen. She claims as she looked out the window and saw it, it had red glowing eyes. She said it then took off and flew into the sky. She swears on everything that it was not a bird or any other type of flying animal, and it was definitely not a human. Around this time when things were getting really bad, the Washington Post, which is a newspaper company, heard about all the sightings that were occurring in West Virginia, Point Pleasant. John Klein, a reporter for the Washington Post and researcher, was sent to Point Pleasant. He lost his wife 2 years earlier in a car accident. He went to Point Pleasant, and there he started his investigation. While there, he had reported on many stories. What follows is an actual documentation of his contact with the paranormal. He was in a motel room, distraught and sitting on the bed. The phone then rang, and John Klein went to pick it up. The voice on the other phone sounded electrical and cut up, but it said,
"Hello, John Klein."
"Who is this?" replied John. It said,
"My name is Andrew Gold."
Before John could say anything else, it said,
"Your father was born and raised in Wisconsin. You lived in a greenhouse on Monroe Street, and you don't remember how your mother looked."
John knew this was not a hoax, so he said, "Okay, you have my attention." He then placed his watch in his shoe and placed his shoe under the bed. He asked the voice on the phone, "Where's my watch?" The voice said on the phone,
"Your watch is in your shoe, under the bed."
John then got up and closed the curtains to his motel room and turned off the lights, hoping that no one was looking in. He then sat back down on the bed, picked up chapstick, and put it in his hand. He picked up the phone and asked, "What is in my hand?" Slowly, an electrical voice said,
"Chapstick."
At that point, John Klein became even more fearful of who he was speaking with. He got on the ground and pulled a book from the nightstand and quickly asked the entity on the phone, "Read me line 3, page 55. The entity said it word for word. John sat up for a few seconds and asked the entity, "What do you look like?" The entity replied,
"Why, it all depends on who's looking."
His next question was, "Can I please meet you?" The entity again quickly answered back and replied,
"You already have, John. You already have."
The last question and the most important question in this conversation that John asked was, "What happened to my wife?" The entity then said,
"You saw what happened to her. You were there. You cannot find her by looking. You will see her in due time."
The phone then flew off of John's ear through electrical static, and that was the end of the conversation with the entity. John Klein had an actual conversation with the Mothman. After the collapse of the bridge in West Virginia, Point Pleasant, in 1967, the sightings and the paranormal activity calmed down greatly to the point to where there was very little activity that was documented. One Saturday night, my brother-in-law was working at a security job, and my sister and I were with my mom at a church function. These church functions lasted about 8 to 8:30, so we wouldn't get home to around 9 o'clock at night. We pulled up to our mobile home. Usually, my brother would be inside waiting for us, but instead he was outside standing by himself, looking like he had seen a ghost. We pull into the carport, and I noticed that all the lights are off inside. When we get out of the car, he lifts his hand and points at the house and says in a shaken voice, "I'm not going in there by myself." We asked him what happened, and this is what he told us. "I came home and I was walking into the carport, and I was about to enter the house. I heard what sounded like a group of people talking and laughing inside the house. I heard silverware and dishes clanking loudly, thinking like there was some sort of dinner party, but all the lights were off. I thought you guys were trying to play a prank on me or something. So I got up the steps and I pull out my house keys. The whole time I still hear muffled chatter and laughing and even music. As soon as I put the house key in the doorknob, I heard someone say, 'Shh.' Then the entire house went silent, like everything just stopped at once. As soon as I opened the door, just a little, I heard people running in the opposite direction of the trailer, away from me. At this point, I'm starting to think that it wasn't a prank, and some people have broken into the house and were trying to leave before they got caught. So I ran around the back of the house to cut them off at the back door. But once I got there, everything was quiet. I thought maybe whoever was inside didn't run out because they knew I was gonna go on the other side. So I sprinted back to the front door, opened it, and ran inside. It was quiet and pitch black. I turned on all the lights and cleared the entire house looking for anyone. Not one thing was out of place. Nothing to indicate at all that anyone was there. That's when I ran outside and waited for you guys to get here. My brother-in-law was never the same after that day. This story happened in the Philippines in October of 2002 on Halloween night. This was when I was still a junior in high school. My friends and I stuck around school late one night after our annual Halloween party. We had gotten out my friend's Ouija board. It wasn't the brightest idea, but we were looking for a thrill. We found a nice spot under a tree and proceeded to set up the game. There were 5 of us. We were all expecting some kind of paranormal contact. Rumor was our school was haunted. It said that on Halloween night, the spirits come out to play, and we wanted to get scared that night. We were really excited because it was the first time any of us saw a Ouija board. Our school was located in an old Spanish mission house built in the 1800s when the Spaniards still occupied the Philippines. We were in a section of the school that no one ever went to. We sat down in the middle of an open space with only a small light bulb illuminating the surroundings. My friend, who had brought the Ouija board, proceeded to place it in the middle of the circle. It was a glow-in-the-dark version, which gave us the ability to see what was written in the dark. Not knowing exactly what to do, and going only by what we saw in the movies, we all placed our index fingers on top of the planchette, and we looked at each other and said, "What's next?" We decided to just throw out questions. "Is anyone there?" I called out from the darkness. Nothing happened. One of my friends who was there asked, "If there are any spirits here, please make yourself known." Still, nothing moved. We clearly had no idea what we were doing. One of the boys jerked the planchette, and the girl screamed, breaking the silence. Then we all laughed at how ridiculous this all was. After a bit of joking around, we decided to give it another go. We all placed our index fingers back on the planchette. Once more, we asked, "Is anyone there? We'd like to make contact." We were just about to give up when the wind started to pick up, and the darkness around us seemed to move in. I felt scared for some reason. I didn't know why. We asked again, "Is anyone there?" I remember the dead leaves beginning to swirl around us with the wind. One of the girls said that she was scared and that her mom told her not to play with forces that we do not understand. Despite being terrified, we continued to ask questions like, "Are you a ghost or are you a demon?" But still, nothing happened. "This is boring. I don't know what to do anymore," one of the girls said. Just then, a group of dogs from the neighboring house started barking at us through the chain-linked fence. These 2 dogs were growling and baring their teeth, going crazy. We were all petrified, and without finishing the ritual properly by saying goodbye to the board, we just got up and bolted out of there. We didn't see one another until after Halloween break. And this is where the story gets really terrifying. One of the girls told us about a weird experience she had when she went home with the Ouija board that late Halloween night. She realized that she didn't have her house key, and so she called her younger brother to let her in the house. What he said terrified her to the core. He swore she was already home and had seen her walk in a while before, and said that she looked really tired and stared at him before going upstairs to her bedroom.